I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Kyle Greenwood. This is my wife, Beverly Greenwood. We're residents of Brazos County, and we own the website noeastloop.com. We're also part of a larger coalition of Brazos County residents known as the No East Loop Council. It's formed of representatives from all over the county who've gotten involved and gotten active in this effort with us. We called this meeting tonight to help or raise awareness about the Inner East Loop proposal and to present some of the information we've found. First off, I'd like to recognize some of our elected officials who are here with us tonight. I'll start with, in the back of the room, Representative Kyle Cassell, who's our current representative for District 12. And his successor down front is Trey Wharton, who will be sworn in January to represent us. Additionally, we also have our county judge, Dwayne Peters, as well as Commissioner Conderla, our 2nd Precinct representative. And I apologize if there are others here that I just don't recognize. I don't do this very often. But regardless, thank you all for being here. So we're going to have a couple of presenters tonight. And then we've asked our representatives if they'd like to come up and say a few words. And then finally, we'll give you guys the opportunity to speak if you have some questions or some comments that you'd like to make. Mm-hmm. I'll get this figured out. All right. All right. So I said we'll have public comments. We've recognized our officials. And before we get started, though, I want to say a few things. Number one, I know this is an emotionally charged topic. Many of you are concerned about how this is going to affect you, okay? Our home is one of the ones that would be affected if the proposal goes through, okay? So trust me when I tell you, I get it. However, we're going to conduct a civilized meeting and we're going to be respectful of all the representatives and everybody who's participating. And anybody who can't follow those rules is not welcome here and you'll be asked to leave. Okay? So that's it. I'll turn it over to our first presenter, who's also a member of the East Loop Opposition Council, Dr. Adam Perdue.
Oh yeah, we missed our final goal here was first thing that we wanted to ask for was more time. Right, they sprung this meeting on most of us about 2 weeks ago, basically telling us that this highway was coming through, giving us an option of 1A, 1B, 1C, depending on what section you were closest to. And then the final point is going to be that none of them are good options. And they only gave us like 2 weeks of notice time. And so our first goal was to ask for more time as part of the public interaction period. And we've been informed tonight that it's already going to be extended, but get your comments in as soon as possible and don't wait on them. And then another problem that we've been having is, again, how this seemed to have been sprung up on most of us very quickly, very shortly. And Beverly's going to address a lot of that at the end with her part. And then we want more increased public participation to talk about, my part, whether or not this highway is actually even worthwhile, as opposed to just giving us the options for different routes. There we go. All right. I hate bragging on myself, but this is just I'm not just a schlub, I'm a schlub too, but, you know. But yeah, so Adam Purdue, comma, PhD, and that's the only time you ever need to worry about that part, or the doctor at the beginning, and all of that. I live on Ethan Lane, which is there at 1179 in Steve Hollow. We're outside of any of the routes. My wife and I don't particularly care if the closer route is 0.3 miles, 0.8 miles away. And in my stance against it is not actually that we're close to it. It's about the waste of money that it represents. Whether or not it's where it is or whether it's farther out, it makes no sense to me, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And so these are my credentials as to why I'm somebody that you might want to think about listening to, but you can make up your mind as we go through this. So my PhD is in urban and regional and real estate economics. My dissertation was on exactly these kind of questions about where do people decide to live, where do people decide to work, and how does transportation infrastructure and development change those choices and make people better off or worse off. And that's what my dissertation was. And then since then I've also been active in public policy from an economics perspective, especially urban planning and in urban planning rules and economic development and what goes on and how cities can encourage that or discourage that. And then now I'm a consultant for the developers, and I help builders find out about how much, study their local market areas where they're proposing any development or a new home construction, and find out how much pricing what kind of pricing power they should end up having if they decide to develop there or if they decide to buy some lots and build some homes. And then what led to that is actually for undergrad I was in civil engineering. I was a transportation and traffic engineer, right? So I was an intern for a little bit, right? So that's what, but it's this background that led me back into grad school, right? Interested in questions about cities and local development and transportation infrastructure and all that. So I was an intern at the Texas Transportation Institute for 2 years, and I was a transportation engineer in San Antonio for 2 years. So if you ever went up on the northwest corner of 1604 in the last 15, 18 years, that's my fault, sorry. But anyways, so I'm going to talk about some of the problems I have with the way these options have been presented to us, the way we came to learn about them, and then also what the claims are, mainly about whether or not it'll help traffic, which is sometimes the claim and sometimes not, and then whether or not it'll impact how the cities and the county develop. And so the main problems, again, to reiterate, is that we haven't been very transparent or forthright, or we feel like that the MPO and the county haven't been very transparent and forthright about what we're voting on and what's actually happening, whether or not, the idea that this was a study and thinking about whether or not we're going to build a loop, as opposed to we're definitely building a loop and now you get a choice of 3 routes, all that kind of stuff. And then whether or not they've actually done any kind of steps that tell us whether or not the hundreds of millions of dollars extra that they're going to spend, other than over and above the $10 million that they're already spending, is actually worthwhile for us in the county, for the cities in the counties, and for the state of Texas. And so then a big part of this is talking about whether it's alleviating traffic and whether it is going to redirect development. And so, but first here, back here. So this is a quote that I've gotten from an MPO official at that original meeting. And when you read it off, it sounds very shocking because she was kind of surprised, but this is actually how it is supposed to work, right? So when you're thinking about whether or not there is a need for major transportation infrastructure or traffic engineering, so here there's a lot more with trains and buses in bigger cities, right? You start with the crayon map, which is just basically the map that you've all seen with the 3, 4, 5 highways across Brazos County, and you stand back in Brazos County and you say, I think maybe we need a bus route here, or I think maybe we need a highway here. It's called a crayon map. But the problem so far is you haven't studied it, right? After you get the idea of whether or not you think you might want a highway in a particular location, well, then you need to start actually looking into it, right? You need to look into it and talk about, are people going to be living there? That you're going to be saving time, right? Is it actually going to connect two different destinations that people want to go to that aren't already connected? And questions like that. And that's what they haven't done, right? They did that very easy, very first step is 0. And they might have done the other steps, but they haven't told us about it, right? They might have done step 2 through XX, however many that needs to be, right? But they haven't told us about it. They haven't shared that information. There has been no engineering support, right? When we went to the public meeting, about half of those kids that were standing by the bulletin boards were engineers. Every single one of them, because this is my background, I walked up to found out they were an engineer, are there traffic engineering studies? Right? Have you actually looked at it? How much time is this going to save anybody? Is anybody going to actually use this highway? Right? And I got no's. Right? And most of these engineers have a typical Texas bias and definitely a typical TxDOT bias, which is, oh, we're going to grow, right? Because Texas grows, and thus you need highways, right? And so, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And so, no traffic studies. Do we actually need 3 loops, right? And then where do they need to be? And then for how much growth is actually going to happen? And that growth part is actually going to be killer. And so I'm actually a native Houstonian, grew up in Galveston County, which has about 400,000 people now. As it happens, has 45 and Highway 6 for 400,000 people. Right? If you go to Fort Bend County, almost 1 million people in Fort Bend County, has 59 and Highway 6, right? And so anyways, Houston has come up way too much, right? 500,000 people live inside of 610 in the Houston area. The other 7 million people in the greater metropolitan area live outside of that loop, and they are the ones that use 610 sometimes. You do not use 610 as a bypass around Houston. You use 610 or the Beltway if you're coming from the north and you want to be on the west side. You do not take 610 and Beltway around if you want to be on the north and you want to go to the south side, right? Because it's longer distance. And so it's just basically that simple. But the main thing is just 100%, 7.5 million people versus our forecast here for Brazos County of 371,000, right? That is their forecast for 2445 right now. And we'll come back to that in a second, ask how exactly they got to that, because they didn't tell us. But anyways, so they want, Houston has 610 that is about 6 miles away from downtown. Then it has the Beltway 8, which is both a super arterial with a freeway in the middle, and that is about 12 miles from downtown on average. Then you have 6, which is about, which I didn't put on this map, but it's about 15 miles away from downtown on average, and now you have 99. Right? And so that is 7.4 million, 3 or 4, right? Super highways and super arterials and major arterials that loop around the city for 7.4 million people. And functionally, they're telling us we need the same amount of highways for their eventual forecast of 371,000 people. That's is it even going to be 371,000 people? Correct. But how did they get this number? It's actually kind of crazy, and how do they present it? So the first thing that's crazy here, so yeah, I'm an urban economist. I did grow up in Houston and spent my time in San Antonio, and so I studied cities, right? And so this might be a little bit biased, but the Texas Triangle is about the cities, right? This 35 million potential. Don't know where we get this, and you'll understand in a second why we shouldn't necessarily trust that 35. I'm hoping they went ahead and went to the state demographer for this one, right? That 35 million by 2050 will be 33 million of them in Houston Metro, Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, Austin Metro, and San Antonio Metro. All of the local economic development type of people that are anywhere near this triangle like to put this on their slides, right? But as we can see on the on that industrial development there on 290 and 6, where you come up off of Hempstead, a lot of the development doesn't like that you are midway between all of these populations, because that means you're not close to any of those populations. But anyway, that's an aside. This 371,000 people here that they put here, plus 160 plus 101, is already tending to make all of y'all, I freaked out when I first saw it, and this is my field, because I'm thinking they're telling us that there's going to be almost 600,000 people in Brazos County. Now, I don't know how many of y'all thought that too when y'all read that, but they're double counting already. right? And especially because they put down unincorporated, all right, which is completely not happening. There are 30,000 people in unincorporated Brazos County right now. The unincorporated Brazos County is not increasing by 10 times in 20 years. That is just absolutely preposterous, right? And so what they do is they have a typo there. And then, right now the population is 244,000 in Brazos County, right? So now, that's reasonable, but that's only a 50% increase, going from 244,000 in 2023 to 370,000 in 2045, right? So they are leading you to think that their forecast is actually that there's going to be an additional 100,000 people, which is a lot to a lot of us, right, that have gotten used to living here in Brazos County, right? But it's only going to be half, right? Well, sorry, they're leading you to believe that it's going to be 240,000, right? And so it's half that growth, right? If we were increasing by 91%, let me get that one correct. If we were increasing by 91%, it would be an increase in population of almost 240,000 people. Instead of the 50% increase in population that 371 actually represents, once you get rid of the typo, is only half that size, right? And they did the same thing for Bryan. Bryan right now is 89,000 people. 89 to 101 is not 33%. It's closer to like 11%. 160. College Station currently has 125,000 people in it. All of these numbers are coming from the census. That is not a 71% increase in population going from 125 to 160. It's closer to a 30. So they mislead us by trying to combine, double all of these numbers, and then they're putting up at least twice as fast of growth rates as to what actually is happening, right? So that's what, you already can't trust them, right? And then they put this, A&M's growth, this is actually slower growth than what they represent for the county, 1.8 over 2018 to 2024, during 25 by 25, right? A&M has been doing the biggest and most massive campaign to increase their student population over this period of time, and they've managed an annualized growth rate of 1.8. So that, that didn't do much, right, when you compound that up. So this is actually, right, that's what people always try to get. It's 8%, it's 1.8 for every year, right? And so then it's just a little bit lower, sounds a little bit more manageable, and it's during the most massive growth pace A&M's ever seen. A&M is not going to double in size by 2045. Okay? But I mean, because eventually at some just any kind of same state policy is going to spread those students out, right? Send them to the University of Houston, send them to Texas Tech, send them to the University of North Texas, across the rest of the state. Or at least to the rest of the A&M system. You got Galveston, you got Corpus, you got A&M West, Texas, and all that kind of stuff. But anyways. And so that's all that problem. It's just on that one slide. And this is what they're using to argue that we're having growth that requires 3 highways. 371,000 people in actuality. That number actually, okay, it's a little bit higher than what I would do, but okay, let's go with that one. Still doesn't require 3 highways. And I'm going to argue that it doesn't require 1. But, anyways. All right, so there's, right, when that 371, if you go ahead and take them as forecasting the whole county instead of just the unincorporated county, right, would actually require, so this is getting a little nerdy, but actually requires that the growth rate increases, right? After decades and years of growth in Brazos County actually falling every year, we're still one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Texas, but it has been falling every year. And this, just as a standard demographic thing, if we have anybody else in the social science here, just doesn't happen without some kind of major shock to the system, right? That is, right, Houston gets wiped out, they all move here, okay, yeah, we'll grow faster, right, in the next 10 years. But you need something like that. You need to be talking, you need to justify this increased growth rate after decades and decades of falling growth rate. You have to justify it, and we didn't get that. And so up there up top is Brazos County and Bryan and College Station and all this other stuff. And I can tell you why we did see, so like here, Bryan, from 20 to 23, where you did all of a sudden see a pop in population growth. just for those 3 little years. And it's basically because College Station has shut down. It's like getting in the way of new homes getting built, right? They're not doing the zoning anymore for it. They're not annexing more land anymore. Whereas Bryan, in the last few years, has just taken the complete opposite path, right? Zoning letting everybody build everything, subsidized building, right? College Station put in the impact fees and all of that other kind of stuff. And so what we're seeing here is college growth that would have gone to College Station is getting shifted up to Brazos. But it's not new growth. Okay. And so then here too, right, this is just a shock to the system. As a PR kind of thing, I wouldn't have just shown all of this freeway all at once, right? And so my main problem here is, it is a super highway, right? On the MPO thing, they're calling it a super arterial, which is technically correct, right? We're not calling it a freeway because freeway requires nobody to be able to drive onto it, and I think that's not the plan, so it's a super arterial. But we look at this, and it's a super freeway, right? And my main thing here is, if you want all that grass, let's leave it in everybody's front yards. And then talking to the engineers there, and MPOs, and a couple other people who I couldn't necessarily recall what their status was, but they were sitting there talking to me. They can't decide whether or not it's a loop or a bypass, right? And so this is actually a pretty key distinction in transportation terms, but it's not a distinction for this discussion tonight. It's going to matter all that much. But because if it's a bypass, right, you need it to be a straighter, faster route. If you want to, basically when you call it a bypass, what you are specifically trying to do is alleviate traffic in town, right? And so if you do that, right, you get, that's what 6 was relative to Texas. Right, a straighter, faster route without traffic lights. And then if it's a loop, that's almost 100%. We're not expecting the trucks to take it around because it's longer. That's where TxDOT completely messed up with 130 up there in Central Texas to the east of Austin. Right, they built this longer route and they put tolls on it, and they thought all the trucks were going to take it for some reason. But of course they didn't, both because of the longer distance and the tolls, right? And so, but my argument is actually it doesn't matter which one you want to call it, it doesn't do Brazos County any good. Because we know it's not a bypass. And, oh, sorry, we'll get back to that in a second. That's almost the second half of the presentation. And so then, so that's just a reiteration of everything. Right, we haven't been transparent. We feel like it hasn't been transparent. Anybody here feel like, am I putting any words into anybody's mouth? Okay. It hasn't been transparent. We thought, did anybody here think that the bond in 2022 was about anything more than repaving roads and filling in potholes, maybe an extra lane here or there, right? And so, and then a big part of the problem is talking to all of the sub-consultants at the meeting. Everybody there made it sound absolutely like we didn't get any say. It's a done deal, right? That we're just getting to choose between Route 1A, 1B, and 1C, right? And we're all here tonight because we're not going to stand for that, I think. Methodologies to doing the same thing, and I'd recommend each and every one of you take that last option, block on the bottom, and say none of them are going to do it. And so, yeah, that's my last comment. All right. So part of the problem with talking about it being a bypass that's going to alleviate traffic on 6 is that where are the buttons? And actually, again, talking about all the grass that we're not leaving in people's front yards, by and large, all of these scary diagrams are saying that we're really only going to allow it in 1 extra lane. We got all this extra grass, why don't we go ahead and allow it in 4? But the big point is, we are right in 6, right? And so then that will alleviate traffic. That is what that is meant to do, is alleviate traffic. And as I picked the scariest section, 100% transparency here, right? This is right where Texas and 6 merge again, coming south. But the bigger point on alleviating traffic is that this is a big loop, right? So if you want to talk about this alleviating traffic, you have to imagine that truckers and people coming from to Navasota are going to take all of this extra distance to get around 6. Right now, if they were listening to the radio the last couple of weeks and heard that one of these stupid trucks, he just hit the bridge, right, and right, that's right? But by and large, right, you never do that. You never do that. If you go the straightest path, sometimes, yeah, you lift up that bed, right? But nobody takes the longer path around because they're concerned about the traffic in town. And then, the bypass, the idea of a bypass kind of requires, that people want to go to something that's on either side of it, right? So that like you can bypass the section because if you want to get to the other way. So the trucks aren't going to do it, right? The ones that are going long distance all the way from Waco down to Houston are going to go straight because they're not going to take the longer route. But also nobody here in East Brazos County or anywhere in Brazos County is going to take this route. And so this, I got complaints, don't worry, we're going to get bigger maps in a second, right? But I just wanted to show this, right? This is part of the BCS NPO study that forecasts population, where everybody's going to live and where everybody's going to work in 2045. And so what you'll notice if you look at this really closely, it is exactly where everybody currently lives and works, right? Which is between 2818 and Highway 6. Right? We are going to get a couple extra people. We are going to get a couple extra jobs here on 30, right? Which, as it happens, 30 and 159 already serve as a bypass, the exact same manner as this proposed loop for the congested part, right? My parents live down in Navasota, and so once every 3 weeks or so, right, we do try to get to Navasota. The congestion on 6 is from University down south. If you want to avoid the congestion on 6 and you're going to Navasota or vice versa, you already have the option of taking 159 and 30. We don't, and nobody else does either, right? And so this is all of these population and this forecast all the way down here is where we have going to be fixed, right? And so you're not going to alleviate traffic from anybody coming in from the East Loop because by and large, right, except for every once a month trip to grandma's house, right, most of us want to go where the jobs are, right, and where the grocery stores are. When you come in from East County, the reason you live in East Brazos County is either you got land out there and you don't want anything to do with people, or hometown. Go into Bryan, you go into the university, and you go into Central College Station, right? And so then, right, the people who don't want to do with anybody aren't taking the loop because they're not going to visit anybody in Ern and Navasota either, right? And so then this is kind of the thing. With no regular destinations on either end, this highway will take homes, ranches, and farms at extreme cost, right? And financially, right? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, presumably. I don't know how high it counts, which is something that we should already have an estimate of, right? Even if we're working on just 3 possible routes, right? And if the study on the 3 possible routes is costing $10 million already. There is, for no benefit, nobody's going to use the highway, right? Everybody that lives in East Brazos County wants to go. Everybody who's traveling through Brazos County is not going to use it, right? And so, and fundamentally, both in traffic engineering and in urban economics, when you're thinking about a piece of infrastructure, it's about saving people time from where to get from where they are or where they want to be to where they want to go, right? And that is the fundamental question as to whether or not a highway, a bus, a train, any kind of transportation infrastructure is worth it. And sometimes you can measure it by changes in land values. Sometimes you measure it by changes in time, travel times, and stuff like that. But that's the fundamental thing. And so if a highway, I mean, we dealt with that Alaskan $300 million bridge to nowhere back in 2002, and it seems like we're doing the same thing. Now, And so then when I was talking to these engineers and I didn't accept that first thing, they actually said, well, no, okay, so it can alleviate traffic if it makes it so that we don't have to go into town to Walmart anymore. We don't have to go into Bryan, right? We want to redirect development, right? And so then this is really shocking because first of all, it's never, this is low value land and it's going to remain low value land. At the very best, it's going to be slightly pricier and it's never going to support the cost of this infrastructure, right? And then redirect development is just another way to say suck the economy out of Bryan and College Station, right? Which is so surprising because they are part of the cost, right? The MPO, the people that are the people that are in charge of the MPO that sets up these plans and stuff like that, it's actually the city of Bryan, the city of College Station, A&M, and Brazos County, right? And so, and then Mr. Roach told me somebody else too, I forget, but, and so, it's really surprising to see that Bryan and College Station are behind this. Because we know exactly what happens when we redirect development. When we built Texas, we redirected development out of downtown Bryan and off of College Avenue, right? And so then you drive, this is something that my wife and I have remarked on ever since we moved here, right? All of the abandoned retail and office buildings that is littering our city. And it's quite literally because we do keep redirecting development. When we make that shorter, faster route, all the through traffic goes there. And so then if you're a Target or you're a Walmart or whoever, you want to be able to capture that through traffic because you know the locals are going to come anyways too, right? And so then when Texas redirected development from College and downtown, that was a shift, right? And then we redirect development from downtown, College, 29th, and Texas. Right? And then this one's actually via Maria, too. And we've already seen, right, even strips can't hold on to the development, right? We got the mall down there. We got the academy. It hasn't been backfilled yet, right? We don't need any more redirected development. We have plenty of structures and retail and all this other opportunity that is a waste of infrastructure money and tax money. Not paying for the cost of it. And then this is just the same reiteration of everything, right? It's not a loop, it's not a bad pass. We haven't seen any engineering data to support any of the claims that it would be worthwhile. And that's the main thing that we're asking. If you've done the research, you should do the research before you do $100 million worth, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of spending. And so, and just, there's no reason, it's longer route, so not likely that it's going to be a bypass. And then we don't want to redirect development anymore. And so, I think it comes up now for Beverly to finish up everything else. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. I'm impressed. You've been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to those of you that have literally texted me things, emailed me things. You're great investigative journalists, and I love you. You've been great help, so thanks. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So you know, I'm going to throw all of those up there. I was born here in Bryan. I was born in St. Joe's Hospital. I came home to a house in Escondido subdivision on LOE. My dad developed that subdivision. He bought it back in the 70s from Floyd and Crystal Reed. They've owned that land since 1857, and their niece and nephew still live on that property today. After 10 years away, we moved back to College Station in Bryan and went back into the same house on Escondido. I was one of the first students to ever walk into Sam Rayburn Junior High School. As drum major of Bryan High School, I led parades down Texas Avenue. I performed in plays on this very stage. I was in multiple 4-H clubs here in Brazos County. I hung out at Manor East Mall. Anybody else? Who remembers driving down Elmo Wheaton and seeing Jimmy Wheaton with like 10 dogs in the back of the truck? I did because I was his next door neighbor. I graduated here in '94 and then I went to Texas A&M. Graduated there in 1998. I met and married Kyle, the love of my life. We had our reception in our backyard on Escondido right off of Elmo Wheaton. We've built multiple businesses here. We've had great success. We've had horrible failures. We were one of the first houses in Green Branch Loop off of Steve Hollow. I remember Jim Beard would come drive through the neighborhood and knock on the door to check on us and see what we were doing. Anybody know? Did anybody have that experience? I now live on the back side of my childhood neighbor, Pat and Larry Bowman, right off of Steve Hollow. We raised 3 children here on our land. The oldest is now studying engineering at Texas A&M. Like many of you, I'm a Bryanite. I'm an Eastern Brazos County resident, and I'm proud to call myself one. And after 10 days of talking with all of you, I'm even more proud because this is the community I call home, and you're my friends, my family, and my neighbors. So after studying that map, one of the alignments will cut straight through the middle of my property. 21 acres will be landlocked on the other side of a highway with my pond and my water well. And then 9.5 acres will actually have a highway on it. And then as I sit on my porch with my husband and look at what used to be where the animals were grazing, 75 yards away will be a major highway. And I'm sure the running path and the golf cart along next to that highway is going to be used frequently out there by my home. I know every one of you has stories like this. And as a fellow resident, experiencing the very same thing you are, with the same fears and worries, I'm really sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry you got the postcard. I've seen your pictures of flowers, your wildlife, your ponds, your greenhouses, the places where you sit by your ponds, your cattle, your gardens. You've shared those with me in the past 10 days. And I know and I understand each and every emotion. Like most of you, I'm extremely, extremely concerned about the proposal that we've been asked to comment on. Our property is one of many that's directly affected if this proposal moves forward. So after the initial shock wore off, I started to dig, and I learned as much as I can. My research is not going to be perfect, and I've only had 9 days to figure it out, but I tell you folks, this has been going on for years. So as I show grace to the people of whom I'm about to ask these questions to, I also would like that some grace is shown to me as well. When my husband and I started the website, our goal was only to raise awareness. We quickly found and joined the already established Facebook group that was already working to do the very same thing. Awareness, the postcard. Who got the postcard? Wow, would you do that again, please? Look, who got the postcard? How many of you didn't get the postcard? That's a lot of people. They were sent out the end of October. They were insufficient. And they were not received by people outside the 1,000-foot buffer, though this directly affects every single one of us living in Albuquerque. On November 7th, there was an open house that revealed the alignments for the very first time to the public, with very ill-equipped representatives that Adam discussed earlier. They could not answer questions, And they told people that they came up with the alignments by standing back, looking at the map, getting a Sharpie and drawing a circle that completes 2818. After support grew, we determined many people didn't even know it was coming through. Who didn't even know? Who didn't know? Quite a few. 2 weeks is not enough time to make everybody know, to make them know, to let them hear about this. It's not enough time. So then we have this beauty. So for those of you that haven't seen this, the pen represents the comments. The red squares represents those of us that played around it long enough that we figured out we could draw a giant square around our entire property. It's not user-friendly. It's not available. It doesn't work on mobile phones. It's not easily used by our older generations. It's just not. It doesn't work on Google Chrome very well. If you go to Safari, it works better. Did you have those instructions? Did you know that? So this led us to recognize that we need to understand how we got here, and that brings my next point up. It's public participation. How has the public been involved, and why are we building this highway? I looked into traffic complaints and dug for recent studies, of which I found none. I began to wonder how we have had our say on this proposal. I couldn't find any evidence of that either. Are we really going to disenfranchise the people that built this community for the people that want to come here? Then I thought about our quality of life in the rural areas. Anybody know Brian's motto? It's the good life Texas style. Because once a highway is running 75 feet from my porch, it's not going to be a good life anymore. Limited access became my next concern, because 2818 did not have limited access when it was built. So it became a commercially developed roadway on the popular south side. I found a Brazos County regional mobility document that stated this loop would be to divert truck traffic off of Highway 6. So will this road have limited access? For those of us who are getting landlocked property on the other side, how will we access it? And if we have limited access, how will we, the residents of this county that live along the highway, actually even be able to get on it? Excuse me for a minute. I'm sorry, I have talked nonstop for 10 days. There are major concerns to us that we don't have time to cover, but are worth mentioning, because you told me. Wildlife. Where's the wildlife going to go when the highways are moved? They're going to be pushed out further. They're going to go back onto the roads. We're going to hit deer with our cars. Light pollution, heritage of family land, memories of lives built on properties, flooding issues, existing roads declining because they're not maintained, 10 to 20 years of land being tied up and lives being in limbo. That's what I'm looking at. 10 to 20 years of not knowing what to do with that 20 acres on the other side of the highway. Our country lifestyle away from urban development disappears. Increased road maintenance costs with a massive highway coming through. So then I started to think, all right, we need some transparency. Who presented this proposal? So I looked on the postcard and it said, the City of Bryan, City of College Station, TxDOT, BCS, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and Brazos County. What's an MPO? The Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's an entity designed by law with the lead responsibility for the development of the area's transportation plans and to coordinate the transportation planning process. All urban areas over 50,000 population are required to have an MPO if the agencies spend federal money on transportation improvements. It is made of representatives of Bryan College Station, TxDOT, Brazos County, the Brazos Transit District, and Texas A&M University. So when did we vote on this? Okay. Trip bonds, November 2022, Prop A. Commissioners Court authorized to issue bonds of $100 million for the purpose of providing funds for permanent public improvements, including designing, acquiring, constructing, improving, and maintaining roads, bridges, and highways within Brazos County, including the acquisition of land and rights of way, and to be issued in installments with the discretion of the Commissioners Court. KBTX followed up with a story in November 2022. And basically they say, we're going to use it for road improvements on the George Bush Drive and Welborn Road interchanges, the expansions of Highway 6, FM 47 along University Drive, along with a new interchange near Rellis. I don't see the interloop. All right. So here's the other one. This was Prop B. And by the way, remember Prop A passed, correct? All right, here's Prop B. Commissioners Court to be authorized additional vehicle registration on motor vehicles not to exceed $10 for the purposes of funding transportation projects identified by the Brazos County Regional Mobility Authority. That failed. KBTX. Also, I may have to read this whole one. Voters along for the ride on Prop B, which would have added an additional $10 for funding for the BC RMA. Brazos County commissioners and local leaders expressed their support for the registration fee back in November 2020, but voters did not feel the same way, with nearly 60% of the voters rejecting it. I'll skip that quote, then we'll go to the RMA. Originally expressed 3 initial projects of interest. An eastern interloop, which would begin on Highway 6, and you all know where it goes. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Everybody got their view on that slide? So after setting this, I wondered where the money came from then for this project. Back in February, KBTX reported this. Plans for a new highway that will loop the eastern areas of Bryan and College Station are moving to the next step. Brazos County Commissioners recently approved an $11 million design contract for the project. The $11 million design contract is part of the $100 million bond issue approved by Brazos County voters in November 2022. According to the Commissioner Court documents, the design consultant is required to hold 100 meetings with property owners, 25 meetings with stakeholders, and 25 meetings with undefined agencies to address design-related issues. So they received $11.2 million for this project. So I don't feel that we, the taxpayers, have had transparency on what the money was used for. And apparently neither did the media, because this is today. According to this presentation from Brazos County, the East Loop project is to be funded using the voter-approved Transportation Road Improvement Bond Program from 2022. When voters approved that proposition, leaders told KBTX funds would go towards improvements on Highway 6, George Bush, and Welborn intersections, plus improvements to the Rellis entrance. In that same election, voters rejected a second proposition that would increase funds for the BC RMA. Project ideas listed under the proposition included the East Loop project, according to prior coverage. The ballot language of those propositions never cited any specific projects. KBTX reached out to the county leaders who said that the RMA proposition had misconceptions about creating toll roads. Both propositions focused on funding for road projects throughout the county. So, I don't think the media, I don't know. You know what? I'll just let that sit there. You can work on that one. So when did this start? When did this really start? Really? This is a picture I took today. This is TxDOT, and it shows that the East Loop project isn't even in the feasibility study phase, it's in the planning phase. So who gets to decide where the final alignments will be? I would like to know who is cutting my land in half, tearing down all of our houses and running highways next to once country roads. What is the process by which the alignments will be chosen, and who actually got to draw them? Did they really draw it with a Sharpie and not look at the number of parcels it would cross and rooftops it would destroy? Were they drawing at a macro view? Because we all live at a micro view. We live at the micro level, not the macro. Remember, in February 2024, KBTX reported that Quiddity received that $11 million design contract. Something still just didn't sit right with me. I still felt this map is more than a few months old. I still think, when was this map really drawn, and how long have the decision makers known where the route would be? Was BTU aware? Was Wixon Water aware? Did the developers know? Did people buying new houses know? Any new homeowners in here that didn't know? Oh, really? Okay. Did developers buying land and building business parks on the north side of the proposed path? No? So I kept digging. This is dated October 17th, 2019.
During COVID.
Well, we weren't in lockdown at that point. So this is the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Bryan, and I really had to dig for this. I have the link at the bottom if you'd like to screenshot it, and make sure you've got that link saved, please. Let's go ahead and see further down in the document. I'm still going to reference this document. Let's read this one together. The super arterial shown in the current thoroughfare plan would function as an inner loop around Bryan College Station, connecting Harvey Mitchell, FM 2818, with William D. Fitch. The 2016 City of Bryan alignment had the super arterial intersecting FM 1179 at Planters Loop. The BCS MPO altered the alignment in 2017 so that it intersected FM 1179 at Stone Creek Drive. Because of its connection to state roadways, it is likely that TxDOT or an entity other than the City of Bryan, such as the RMA, will construct the super arterial. The development partners want to relocate the super arterial alignment to minimize right-of-way dedication or land conservation for future sale to TxDOT and maximize profits. So, they recommended that we should realign proposed thoroughfares to align with proposed development. Who had a house there before 2019? And here's your maps for 2019 where it was already drawn. So, as I've had to do my own digging and answer my own questions, I would now like the officials that we have elected to represent our best interests to answer them. If the road was already drawn in 2016 and then settled in 2019 after it was worked out with Stella Ranch, why do you need our comments, input, and opinions now? If it was already worked out, why did you use the trip bond funds to pay $11 million to an engineering firm to study it? And if an engineering firm is doing a feasibility study right now, why does TxDOT show that it has moved out of feasibility and into the planning stage? my big question. Why all the smoke and mirrors?
Okay, so what does all this mean? Okay, I don't know what all of this adds up to, but there's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of questions I think that haven't been answered, and I think these questions would be answered if we had a little time, transparency, and public participation in the process. Okay? Specifically, we're asking that the project be paused for 90 days and a public participation plan be put in place and a series of meetings held to educate everybody so we can see what's going on and then everybody can make their voices heard. Because this not only affects the folks who live in eastern Brazos County, but really the entire county, because the entire county's money is going towards building this loop. To be clear, we're not accusing anybody of doing anything wrong, okay? We simply have a lot of questions. And it's very possible that all these things can be explained very simply. We're just asking for some time, transparency, and public participation. So with that, that brings us to the end of the presentation that we had. And so I would ask if any of our representatives would like to come up and say anything. I think we've spoken with Commissioner Conderla.
Howdy. I get up here at the risk of being the face of the guy that's trying to put the loop through, and that's not what I'm here to do. I'm Chuck Conderla. I'm also from here. My family's from here. I'm the baby of the 12 Conderla kids, which might screw up the good doctor's population planning projections if more people are like us. We only have 7. But I grew up in Bryan too. My wife was across the street from me. Can't believe I got her to marry me. I'm class of 95 from A&M. My study was agricultural economics. I have the unenviable position of being Precinct 2 County Commissioner right now, coming in after this bond was passed. But I'm not here to tell you I'm not here to fight against anything that was said tonight. I'm here to talk about this from yet another angle I think we have to consider. I care very much about this. The main entrance to my neighborhood is one of the 2 proposed routes for Interstate 14, so I'm incredibly empathetic to the fears and concerns of many people here and to the anger. The Interloop study is almost entirely in Precinct 2. Bryan, College Station, and Brazos County will be submitting feedback on the loop, just as the public's been asked to do. I can't answer, and I will be asking, I can't answer why TxDOT shows that in planning phase, because the study is 2 years long, and there's people that are saying this is a done deal. This is not a done deal. I haven't even gotten to the good stuff. That feedback period, and I'm here for 2 more years in this term, so I'm going to see this through. Now, if you want to run against me in 2 years, my wife will probably contribute to your campaign. You think I'm kidding? So, everyone is asked to be submitting feedback. They're stakeholders, the Bryan, College Station, the Brazos County, and the citizens. That time for feedback was extended to December 15th. I'm fine to push for 90-day pushback. I think that's reasonable. I'm one voice, but I'll do it. I'll absolutely do it. I came here, had a great conversation with Beverly the other day for an hour and a half, and I had to hug her when I saw her today. I think she's doing yeoman's work on trying to get information out for everybody and make things known, and I applaud that. The feedback, the feedback's important. I can't stress that enough. The group that's putting this together is going to take the feedback in this last public session where some of you participated, some of you weren't able to come. I have a feeling most of you will be there at the next one. That's input that they take in. That was the first public hearing session. They're going to do it 2 more times, and so they're going to be taking the data, adjusting routes, and coming back, and they're going to do that, a total of 3 public inputs for that. The input, I can't stress to you how important that feedback is. The public meeting on November 7th was the first of those 3. Sorry, I lost my track there. I received a lot of emails and comments, as you can imagine, about this. I'm trying to return each one, although please be patient with me. It's going to take me a little while. There's a lot of them. And I also must repeat, the Commissioner's Court does not wield the authority to cancel a loop or prescribe exactly where it'll be. We're one of those that they're going to be getting input from, and trust me, I'll be forwarding input. I'm still trying to, I'm sorry. I urge folks to direct their comments to the study. You're welcome to email me and call me, and I'll try to call you back. It's just going to be, I'm only one person. I don't have a staff to call you back. But the study is important, so please direct your comments to the study. The first submission of that line and why it was there and all that, there's a lot of different things being said as to why that was. I'll just tell you, as Precinct 2 County Commissioner, I'm not okay with that line, those proposed studies. I think that they can be moved. They can do a lot better than what they've done on this first round.
Just a different set of neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, as one example right now, you've got 2 crossings impacting y'all directly. And at 1179, Easterling Estates, Reisinger, Stone Creek, Planters Live, Green Branch, future sites already purchased for Stella Ranch. I think all those routes could be made better. Now this is a big point, probably one of the most important points. Some people say the loop is not needed. We heard great information tonight. And I agree, it's not needed today. The reason that the study is being done is that if the county population were to grow enough that someone with a state agency would come in and say, you know what, we need a loop, and they drew a marker right across East Brazos County, what would that look like if they drew that in 25 or 30 years? That's what this study is for, is to potentially come up that does a whole lot less impact than this first round did. And if ever that line were drawn and it was determined that it's time to build a loop in East County, that you would have a line drawn in potentially 2026 versus, can you imagine how much impact that would have later if the county grew out that way? If it doesn't grow out that way, there won't be a need for a loop. Again, I'm not here as the face of the loop. Please don't take that. I'm just trying to give you my thoughts as a person that lives here. The MPO priorities right now, as I saw them, are widening Highway 6 and the George Bush Welborn Road interchange. Those are expensive, long projects. The county, Brazos County, would not be building a 20-mile loop. The county could never afford to build a 20-mile loop. That would be a state project, just like 2818 was. This is not a done deal. At least where I'm concerned, it's not. And I think I can speak for the judge and really the Commissioner's Court, and probably everybody coming on to the Commissioner's Court. It's not a done deal. We're going to be giving our feedback for sure. There is no funded project for this. This is an immensely expensive project if it were ever to happen. There's no funding for that. This is a study only right now. I hate that there's confusing information about, this is in the planning stages. It's not. You can call TxDOT yourself. So that needs to be updated. But this project is not funded, and I can't stress that enough. If it were to ever be funded, it'd be a long time from now. The county's not going to use eminent domain to take houses for a loop and then give people pennies on the dollar. The county doesn't do that. The county doesn't have the money to do eminent domains on a 20-mile highway. I have no interest in doing that as a commissioner. So whether... so let's talk about that. The way I see where we're at right now, I'm gonna say again, I'm not here trying to sell you on the loop. I'm trying to tell you my thoughts on this study. Studying the least impactful route now gives us the best voice in the future. If we establish a corridor now, if it's never built, then we're all relieved. I'm not for a loop. I'm for potentially carving out a route so that we don't have a bigger impact on us one day if it's decades from now. I've prayed a great deal about this. I'm in communication with Beverly, and I will be throughout my service as commissioner. The court will not have final say-so, but we use every bit of the say we have to arrive at a better route than the current one we have. So I keep saying a better route. If you want to oppose the loop, I fully respect you. Please, though, don't just do it in here. Submit your comments on the study. Those comments are going to be looked at. I'm not here trying to tell you to be for the loop. I'm trying to say that my concern as someone who will be long out of office in 20 or 30 years is that if that line is drawn then, the impact it might have on the county. If the good doctor's right, it's not going to be built. I think people are still going to come here. They're going to build houses and businesses. We eventually cause somebody somewhere to maybe start drawing markers on a map. And if we have our loop kind of established, that'll be our preventative defense, if you will. I think in 20 or 30 years, if they draw the line will be the line. So I would encourage people to give input. And if that input is don't build this loop, then my goodness, please put that down. I'm not telling you not to. Again, I don't want to be the face of the loop. I'm just the face of this where we put our input in. Input could be location, but it can also be the speed limit, the amount of lighting, and for God's sake, avoiding the maximum number of rooftops. Finally, I did not come to sell the loop. I got to say that again. I'm only trying to say that we've got to potentially get that information out there to protect us. And let me just tell you about one I read about today. Collin County is doing a loop around McKinney. It's 12 miles, and they're displacing over 300 people. Denton County is doing a loop 24 miles long. They're displacing 21 people. The difference was that the planning. The difference was that people made their voices known. So on the study, if it goes forward, that the loop, if your comments are received, that might really shape the loop one day if it were built. If it's not built, I'll party with you on that one. Again, I'm not for it, but I think we should take the study seriously and put our data into it. And lost my place again. A little nerve-wracking up here. I'm not even for it. But I'm not happy that people are filled with anxiety and anger. I'm not happy that people have had to take time away from their families and homes to come here tonight and talk about this. But it's important. And as many of you know me, I'm one of you. I'm looking around the room and I know almost everybody in here. Please submit your feedback to the study, and I'm going to do the same. And I'm going to fight for a route that's least impactful should that loop ever come. And if it doesn't ever come, great. I'll continue to keep the people of the county in my prayers, and I'll move through this study with you, Beverly, together. And I'll share with you my mother's favorite prayer, and that is simply, Jesus, I trust in you. I think we'll get through this together, and I'm going to represent you the best way that I can during that study. Again, it's only a study, no project is funded. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. I want to reiterate what he said. We all need to submit our comments on the survey. They've made it clear that that's what they want us to do. And so please, everybody, submit your comments. Okay? That said, I'm going to hand off the mic as an opportunity for some of you to make some comments, or if you have some questions to ask.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Beverly, for all the work that you've done. Doctor, appreciate the presentation you did. My name is Robert Johnson, and I've lived here for, it'll be 24 years, coming in January. So I'm an implant. My wife is too. She's been here the same amount of time. We have 2 kids that we were planning on retiring here in our home on Planters Loop, and that's where our forever home was supposed to be, and that's what we hope it still will be. So I have a lot at stake with this. There's a lot of good points that were brought up tonight, a lot of good questions that were brought. One of the questions I have is, apparently there's $11 million that was paid to this firm to do this study, and I know it's a contract, so it's over a certain number of years. As we've seen, and even the comments that were made in there, because I went to the presentation on the 7th and talked to several people, including, I think her name was Jackie Wilson, who told me, and she was interviewed on KPTX as the project manager. She had no answers. According to her, she was also unaware of the I-14 and I-214 loop that is being planned on as well. Looking at what was done, there was little to no research that was done over the area that they drew their little line on and put all these maps out for us to look at. Several things that were covered is there's a dam, I believe, in the south part of the county. This loop goes through the most populated portion of the eastern part of the county. It goes over part of my property where the city of Garland just finished putting up redoing the giant concrete power lines that run through the county. So it's going to go right over that, so there was no looking at that. Goes right through the Stella development that's across the street from us by the water tower. And apparently the city knew that. But that would go through and wipe out homes that are already look like there are plots being done. They're already clearing through there. And then it goes all the way down through over to the other side of the county through many people's homes that I know that it's going to affect. So if they did that design and they just drew a line right over there, and then they come back, and I know that I spoke to Mr. Condola for a while on the phone, and he said when they presented the project to them before the 7th, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that their whole point was studies show that in planning these things, they need to be 3 miles at the apex away from the main thoroughfare through an area, which would be Highway 6 in this case. And that puts it right where they're throwing it right now, without looking at anything that's already there. That was done on the western part of town in 2818, and that was built back in 1965. So we're talking 60 years ago. If that really needed to be done, why wasn't it done 60 years ago before all these new rooftops were put in that? If we are paying a company $11 million of all of our tax money, and that's all they did, didn't look at anything that was on the map, they didn't do any kind of research, any kind of studies, any of those things, didn't look at the impact that it was going to be, and they just looked and went, let's just connect 2018 and drive and mirror what in the east, what happened in the west. Where's that money gone? Where is it going to go? Because I saw the poster boards that were out of there, and they were basically the same ones that were at the Legends Event Center back on July 17th when TxDOT put up their presentation for I-14 and the 214 loop. Which, by the way, the 214 loop, depending on where you looked at those maps, because they were just as confusing, and they went in several different places the way these were, depending on which map you looked at on the 7th or the other night, goes either in the same place that this interloop's going, or is going through 2038 where the outer loop is that's put there. So this is a redundant project that will double our payments through tax money. So, and if the head of this project didn't know anything about that. How is that possible? So there's quite a few questions here with that. But the big one is, we're paying this company $11 million of our tax money. Where is it going? Because I could have done that. I would have taken $10 for it. All the poster boards that were out around over there were basically the same one, especially the pictures of the way the road's gonna look and all that. They were the same that TxDOT had for their presentation. I could have gone to Office Max and got those done for less than $1,000. The computer program, which doesn't work anywhere, and how can you use Safari? And I'm not a technical guy. Jeff Peters will tell you that. We work together. I don't know anything about computers. But if you can't use Chrome, which is one of the, the newer stuff, you have to go back to Safari to do this stuff, and you can't even do it on our little hand computers that everybody walks around and can't seem to get off of. How is that? What are we paying for? Yeah. $11 million of our tax dollars for a bond that was less than forthright, but that's what we get when we vote for stuff like that. I didn't vote for it. Because bonds like this are written so that you can do whatever you want with the money as long as it sort of falls into what the bond states. So there's your lesson for the next time you go out to vote. Don't vote for these bonds, because that's what happens. Now, the follow-up to that is, if we've already spent $11 million just on this study, when they come through to do eminent domain and take houses, if it stays the way it is, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people's homes that are going to go, lots of property in that. For the 1179 project, there is a house at the end of our loop that's already vacant because TxDOT bought it. Smaller than our house, less land than it is, and they paid those people $500,000 for it, all right? So let's use that as an example, and let's say that that is the average that they're gonna have to spend on property when they go through and buy people's lands. And that is an extremely low average that I'm talking about right over there, okay? If they do that with the hundreds of homes and properties that they're gonna have to go through and take, right now, if you look at the county website, it shows that this interloop project will cost $305 million and some change, and that was from the 2022 project, all right? If you look on there, I looked at it today. You have to spend $500,000 at an average for all those properties. That's gonna at least double the amount of money that's gonna come out of our taxes, whether it's local, county, state, or federal, to pay for this thing that isn't needed and we don't want. So, what are we gonna do with that? So, and then you lay on top of that all these hundreds of people that we're gonna have to move, correct? Let's say 80%, and that's a low end, are gonna have to stay here in Brazos County, right? They're not moving to go anywhere else. Where are those hundreds of people gonna go? There is already a much publicized national and local housing shortage. So if they're gonna take their homes, where are you gonna go? And if you don't know how eminent domain works, they pay you what is proper market value, correct? But if they paid me proper market value for my place that I have now, I bought it at an interest rate extremely lower than it is now. So it doesn't take into account for that, all right? Then if I need to move into a place that's equivalent to what I have, which I do need to do, then how am I gonna be able to afford that? And where am I gonna find it in the same place? Because I need to live in Brazos County. So those are some questions that need to be answered, in my opinion. But what do I know?
We'll take a couple more questions if somebody raise your hand.
No, we got like 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah.
I got one. We brought up the $10 million legal study again. There's a lot of crayon lines on that big map. Can we find a cheaper way to decide that we don't want to do all the rest of the crayon lines?
Hello, my name is Barry, and I'm with the consultant team that is working with the county to move the study forward. One thing I want to tell you is your elected officials are some of the best people that I've worked with in the past. As far as the $11 million, it's roughly 11.4. Originally, when the bond was passed, there was $13 million set aside. That contract was negotiated. The loop that Chuck mentioned earlier, in Denton County, 20 miles is $25 million contract. I've got another one that's 7 miles, it's $13 million. So just to give a little background on that, as far as the cost of the engineering contract. One thing I'd like to mention,
So that didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, where did the money go?
Because I could get up, like I said, I could just rob that out of the.
understood, $11 million is a lot of money, you know, $1,000 is a lot of money. So any dollar that the taxpayers have is a lot of money, and that has to be spent wisely.
What did pay for?
This, I'm getting there. This goes for the engineering studies, as far as the route studies, the environmental work. This project has to follow the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA process. Same thing that TxDOT does, it has to follow the federal process. We are just at the beginning of the overall study. This first meeting was the first meeting of 3 that will, and if there has to be more, you know, there has to be more. Let me get to the end here.
Just start there.
Get to it.
As far as-
Taking a long way to get there.
Let's go.
Okay.
Well, let it finish, let it finish.
Let's be respectful.
So I'll tell you, I'm an engineer and not a great public speaker, but I can tell you the money's being spent wisely. What the study pays for is all the route studies and environmental work that follows the federal process. Go ahead.
Have y'all been paying any money yet?
I'm not a part of the $11 million. I work for a different consultant that represents the county. Okay, the money that's been paid, roughly, I think 18% of the money has been paid up to this point. I want to say one more thing. The 90-day hold, I think is a good idea. We've already discussed that with the project team, TxDOT, and the cities. And we're going to be doing some different meetings, Rotary, everything we need to do to move the project, to explain any disinformation that's going on. Yeah, transparent. And
Misinformation, not disinformation.
Okay.
well, one thing I'd like to mention, as far as the study,
Got it here, let's
moving the
hear what he has to
study
say.
and as part of the environmental process, the NEPA process, the no-build is always considered. Whether that happens is based on the traffic demand and future demand with the travel demand from the MPO. One more question. Any more questions?
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
How did y'all use the MPO maps that were given to you? Is that where y'all drew those lines?
The study had to be started there with a starting point of the MPO line, and there was a 1,000 to 2,000 feet window, a study area around that MPO line. That is not the alignment that has to be chosen, but that was where we started because that process had already been started
In 2016.
7 years ago, 8 years ago.
So I have a question. So we're spending $11 million for y'all to study this, and if this isn't the proposed route and it decides to move, is it gonna cost us another $11 million in tax?
That's all part of the, it's all part of the,
It works.
all part of the study. No additional fees will be
So
paid.
you're telling me that $11 million is gonna design this, it's gonna get it ready to go. no matter if we have to move it a mile or we have to move it 5 miles or anything, the county's not gonna pay you no more than $11 million.
Well, it's not for free, that's part of the, that's part of the study.
Here, wait. Wait, I'll save you I'm gonna save you $11 million right now. Do you see where that red line and that green line come together, that land? There was an environmental study done probably around 5 years ago when the people who own that land proposed to put a sewage plant there. That environmental study failed. So how come it failed for a sewage plant, but now we're gonna run a superhighway through it? So we can save $11 million today when I tell you that there's already an environmental study, you can go look it up.
This study has
And
not
it's
got
on that land right there
funded.
that it's going to propose route.
If it has to, if the alignment has to be moved, that's what, there's flexibility in this alignments. That's what I'm trying to say.
We need to cut this off.
I'll be around to answer more questions.
Okay, I think that's probably enough.
I sent my comments with the PDF attached. The only comment I made was comments attached.
Let us speak in the mic.
I don't like I don't like being in front of people. But I sent my comments as a PDF attached to a Gmail. I sent it to the address that they had on there. And my phone told me this evening, they're gonna try 46 more hours to get it to go through. How do I get my dadgum comments through?
I can answer your question afterwards. I will help you with that question after.
Okay, all right. I think that's enough. We were able to present the information we wanted to, again, to help raise awareness. We appreciate everybody coming out. Specifically, we want to recognize again our elected officials who made the effort to come here tonight. The judge, and the commissioner as well. who's standing right here and speaking. Okay? So, thank you all for coming out.